Hi everybody, welcome to Sunya IAS. Welcome to the mains article discussion. The topic for today is remote sensing and GIS, Geographic Information Systems in disaster management. Okay. And again, before I begin, I'll just briefly introduce what remote sensing and GIS means, and also there's a difference between these two terms. Okay. So again, when I use the term remote sensing, that means that we are going to capture any image without coming in direct contact. That is why the word is remote. So remotely you can capture an image. Now you can use it by using a variety of sensors. Okay, and these sensors can be present in any aerial satellite. Okay, so both in slightly high altitude areas or also in satellites, we can have different sensors which can capture the images. That is the main role of remote sensing. And when I'm able to present, analyze, and interpret an image, the one which is captured by remote sensing, that is known as Geographic Information System, because it involves presentation, analysis of the images that are captured. Okay, and of course, when we are talking of disaster management, both these things have a very important role. So here in this mains article discussion, we'll start with data, we'll see the need of it. I'll also share a framework on disaster management through which you can brainstorm a lot of points in this particular segment, and also we'll see some of the limitations. Okay, and again we'll see the specific case for a country like India. Okay, because again this requires investment in high-end sensors, right? So that also we'll also see all of that, right? Now when I say data, okay, now because the topic is related to disaster management, every year 250 to 300 billion dollars are lost because of disaster management. 250 to 300 billion dollars per year, which makes it important for us that if we improve our pre-disaster, during disaster, and post disaster technology and infrastructure, we will be able to save a lot, both in terms of lives, in terms of livelihoods, and in terms of infrastructure. Okay, because when we've seen cyclone, droughts, tsunamis, floods, all these things, they cause a lot of havoc on the existing systems, be it, let's say, the landslides in Himalayas. So cumulatively, there's a big loss which happens every year, up to the tune of around 250 to 300 billion dollars. Okay, which happens. So if we are able to integrate remote sensing and GIS, we will be able to make some savings. Now, second thing, when I say the word data, and I told you that there are a lot of, let's say, different datas which you get through remote sensing. So some of the examples I would like to share with you. What kinds of data can you get? Okay, so you can get spatial data, which means I can talk about a ref terrain, I can take an urban area, I can talk about forests. So spatial means according to that particular place. Fine. So I can get access to different kinds of spatial data. Okay. I can also have temporal data. Temporal means we can observe a period or a place over a period of time. It can be, let's say, 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month. And that is how, let's say, if you want to observe forest cover over an area, you go for a temporal data. Okay, that month on month, year on year, how much is the change? So you can also get that data, temporal data. So you have spatial data, temporal data. We can talk about weather and climate data. Okay, so again, any particular region you want to observe remotely, you can capture a lot of images. You can analyze those images. Okay, and then this will help you in better collection, right? So this also is something that we can think about. Then additionally, we can also get disaster specific data, which means, let's say, if I want to map the landslides in particular hazard prone regions, I can also get that data. Okay, so various kinds of data you can capture. That is one. Also, there's a huge sense of loss which happens because of these disasters, which can be averted by the use of technology. That also makes this thing important. Now, one more thing we have to understand, that when you think about remote sensing, so the United Nations Office on Disaster Risk Reduction, okay, it spoke about having open skies, okay, so that the countries can observe the changes which are happening, okay, and they can also mutually share the data or mutually exchange the data, so that, because in many cases the disasters are transboundary, so to mitigate the transboundary, let's say, hazards, one needs to have a proper policy in place, okay. Again, if you have a very, let's say, complicated process, if the countries again and again have to take consent, if they have to manage, so that would have made it difficult. So this open skies policy in that sense can really help, okay. So these are few points with respect to what kind of data you can obtain, what is the magnitude of loss, and again the United Nations Office on Disaster Risk Reduction talking about the countries being able to share the data on such sensitive matters, okay. So that is something that at least we can talk about in this particular regard, right? Now moving forward, let us talk about the need, the importance, or the benefit of this, okay, that why would you want to use this, okay. So there are many points. In fact, before I give you the points, I'll give you some examples also. Right from the earthquake which happened in Bhuj or in Gujarat in 2001, okay, floods etc. which happened in Haiti in 2010, floods etc. which happened in Kerala in 2018, okay. In fact, a lot of new early warning systems now installed in Odisha, which help mitigate against a lot of cyclones. So there has been an progressive integration of remote sensing and GIS. तो हमने बहुत बार देखा कि हमने जब GIS और remote sensing लगाई और एक तरह से implement करी, we were able to reduce the casualties, we were able to safeguard this. That is what this is also important. So one by one we will see. अब देखिए, अगर हम बात करते हैं remote sensing की, या फिर if I talk about the GIS, it helps me in hazard mapping. कोई भी एरिया है, in this area there will be some very core area, a very vulnerable area, कुछ एरियाज इतने ज्यादा vulnerable नहीं होंगे. तो डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट में यू शुड बी एबल टू एनालाइज एंड देन प्रेडिक्ट कि हाँ यहां पे दिस इज द मोस्ट वल्नरेबल एरिया, आई नीड टू हैव गुड इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर या गुड रिस्पॉन्स सपोर्ट हियर. तो पहली बात तो यू विल बी एबल to do the hazard mapping. This can happen in earthquake prone zones, in forest fire prone zones, ठीक है, या landslide prone zones, zones which have cloud burst. तो जो भी ऐसी disasters हैं, we will be able to do the hazard mapping of those disasters. Fair point, okay. Then the demographic data also. So again there are a lot of regions. For example, if I talk about, अगर हम coastal states की बात करें इंडिया के, अब coastal states are more vulnerable to the disasters, right? So agar if we are doing the proper remote sensing of the regions which are, let's say, coastal regions, or the regions which have a rough and a different hilly या slightly dangerous terrain, तो वहां पे भी आपको demographic data मिल सकता है, plus you will be able to save that demography also through remote sensing and GIS. क्योंकि देखिए, when I'm saying again and again remote sensing, अगर conventionally if the people, let's say government officials या बाकी technicians जाते, तो they would also have a threat, उनकी जान को भी खतरा होता, okay, they would have faced a problem. Now because of technology I can serve, let's say, move through these rough terrains, difficult areas, so I can also do the hazard mapping. I can also obtain the demographic data, the percentage of population, etc. Okay, so this demographic data, if I'm able to map, okay, so that can also definitely tell, okay, कि कोई भी लैंड है, फॉर एग्जांपल इसी तरह से कुछ इंपॉर्टेंट स्पेशियल टोपोग्राफी मैप्स होते हैं. अब लैंड को मैंने अगर ऊपर से देखा, मुझे पता चल जाएगा ठीक है यहाँ पे दीज आर द रीजन्स ऑफ फॉरेस्ट, दिस आर सेटलमेंट्स, ठीक है. तो अगर कोई भी हजार्ड आएगा, आई नीड टू सेव द पीपल हु आर in this. So that is how demographic data helps, okay. देन सेम चीज है, अर्बनाइजेशन ट्रेंड्स भी पता चल जाएंगे इफ आई टॉक अबाउट लेट्स से डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ एन एरिया, राइट? So how many people are migrating? What is the sense of urbanization? Maybe there is a close by river, कुछ settlements यहाँ पे हो सकते हैं. तो किस तरह से urbanization? What are the industries which are set up? What is the core critical infrastructure? तो through the analysis of these images, I will also be able to understand urbanization trends, and then I will also be able to understand कि हाँ, these are the vulnerable sections. These are the areas जहां पे infrastructure कमजोर है. This is the area where we have to focus more efforts on. Okay? तो ये भी एक इंपॉर्टेंट चीज है जिसमें आइडिया लगेगा. दूसरी एक और चीज, if there is more urbanization, you can even see more deforestation, loss of natural ecosystems. ये चीजें भी हम एक तरह से एनालाइज कर सकते हैं through this data. Okay? Then we can create hazard, or let's say we can have the hazard models. अब रिस्क मैपिंग में देयर इज अ थिंग नोन एज मॉडलिंग. ठीक है, आप मॉडल्स बनाते हैं कि लेट अस सिमुलेट, कि मान लेते हैं इस एरिया में फिर से कोई साइक्लोन आएगा. ओके, इफ अ साइक्लोन कम्स, व्हाट इज द रीजन विच इज मोर अंडर हार्म या थ्रेट. तो ऐसे हजार्ड मॉडल्स आप कैसे बना पाएंगे? यू नीड टू हैव डेटा फॉर इट. हाउ वुड यू गेट डेटा? यू विल गेट डेटा थ्रू जीआईएस एंड रिमोट सेंसिंग. And जो countries, for example, the countries which have a lot of money, they are able to create very complicated and multi-dimensional या multi-threat oriented hazard models. उसके basis पे वो अपने contingency plan बनाते हैं and they are able to then predict better. सारा गेम डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट का यही है कि प्री डिजास्टर आप कितनी चीजें अवर्ट या रोक सकते हैं. हाउ मेनी थिंग्स आर यू एबल टू स्टॉप प्री डिजास्टर. ओके, बिकॉज अल्टीमेटली ड्यूरिंग डिजास्टर यू ओनली हैव टू देन एंश्योर किसी तरह से यू आर एबल टू रिड्यूस द इम्पैक्ट. But it is always said prevention is better than cure, right? So hazard models, etc., they can be then created, etc., to understand. Okay, understanding the weather information, this goes without saying. I told you weather and climate data is already shared or understood. Okay, so you also get an idea. Okay, so for example, if I talk about Kerala, okay, different parts, or let's say Delhi or Mumbai, in which you had a lot of rainfall in a very short period of time. So this can lead to urban floods. There can be proper good, let's say, early warning systems. There can be good dissemination of information in a timely manner. ठीक है, तो weather information, if this is done on a very timely manner, the people can be made aware. Okay, वो maybe they would want to move away. The government can also create those, let's say, proper warnings, right? So that can be done. And important also is, one of the benefits is crowd control. Now you know the disasters can happen because of stampede, people not knowing, okay, what to do, how exactly to move. So crowd control is also very important. In fact, hum to upar remote, let's say through remote sensing, we can also see how is the crowd moving, in which direction. Suppose सारा crowd एक particular direction में जा रहा है and you have a debris, a loose piece of land which perhaps can fall, etc. ठीक है, लैंडस्लाइड हो सकती है, तो आप उनको पहले से ही अलर्ट कर सकते हो. So ultimately the disaster response forces can have better plans if they are able to integrate remote sensing and GIS, right? Then data management. अब देखिए, इससे पिछली स्लाइड में we were talking about the need of data, right? And especially when I talk about technologies like remote sensing, it is very much important that you are able to manage the data. क्योंकि disasters में you don't need to have a very 1 or 2 3 year. If possible, take a long term average of data. Then you will understand the monsoon patterns, etc. And उसमें भी there is a one threat or changes of climate change. Okay, so data management helps you in crowd control, helps you creating better policies, long term policies, helps you create evidence based policies, right? So that is also something one wants to at least take note of. Evidence based policies की हम बात कर सकते हैं. ठीक है, then you can have rescue work. For example, if there's a disaster, there's a pre-disaster, during disaster and post-disaster. During disaster और post-disaster में हम rescue work better कर सकते हैं. Maybe we'll see the images, we can understand, okay, these many people are stuck in this region. Okay, तो rescue work better हो सकता है. You can save more lives in a timely manner. Okay, so this let's say definitely can be done. Okay, then यू हैव पोस्ट डिजास्टर, इनफैक्ट इसकी नेक्स्ट वाली स्लाइड पे मैं आपको कुछ कुछ पॉइंट्स स्पेसिफिकली भी बताऊंगा टू राइट देम डाउन. पोस्ट डिजास्टर में भी, बिकॉज इन पोस्ट डिजास्टर वी टॉक अबाउट रिहैबिलिटेशन. In fact, the Sendai framework, okay, which actually replaced the Hyogo framework, okay, Sendai framework talks about कि post disaster 3Bs. What are they? Build back better. Okay, it talks about 3Bs, build back better. Okay, ultimately rehabilitation कैसा हो? How can you create a disaster resilient infrastructure is what you need to understand in post disaster. ठीक है. Again, to understand disaster prone areas, how you can understand? Through hazard mapping, through hazard models, all these things you can understand. तो अब one size fits all approach is not needed. If I have a big piece of land, I will understand which area needs the most attention, which is the most vulnerable areas, कहाँ की population ज़्यादा threat में है, वो भी हम समझ सकते हैं यहाँ से. ठीक है. Forest cover, this also you know. In fact, if you say, for example, the Indian State of Forest Report of 2021, it says that India's forest and tree cover is 24.62%. How does it tell you? It is done through remote sensing. In fact, not just forest cover, forest fires भी जो होती हैं, we can also see forest fires, etc. through and analyze it better through remote sensing and GIS. ठीक है. Then you have cheap alternatives, right? अब cheap alternatives का simple ये मतलब है कि for example, if you are able to then have a proper technology, पहले देखिए, if conventionally आपको क्या करना पड़ता था, a lot of human were involved, there was also a threat to their lives. So this number one takes less time, it can be integrated better, and overall if you see it is a cheaper alternative as compared to the other cases as well. ठीक है. तो अगर आपने GIS और रिमोट सेंसिंग को अच्छे से इंटीग्रेट कर दिया अपने क्लाइमेट मॉडल्स और अपने पॉलिसीज में, दैट अगेन हेल्प्स. इट हैज मल्टी डायमेंशनल बेनिफिट. हाउ? हेल्प्स यू सेव द एनवायरमेंट इकोनॉमिकली ऑल्सो. ठीक है. in the long term it is very much useful. Socially also helps the people. Okay, helps you mitigate against deaths. Okay, crowd में भी कुछ clashes हो जाए तो ये सारी चीजें वो prevent करेगा. That is why it's a multi-dimensional impact. Okay, because ultimately you want to save both the lives of people, their livelihoods, also the infrastructure. Okay, so these are few things that you have to understand. Now again I told you, in disaster management, you should remember a simple framework, okay? Which means think pre-disaster, think during disaster, and also think post-disaster, okay? These are the first three elements. In fact, if you are supposed to write what should be done, try to write in this framework: pre-disaster, during disaster, okay? And post disaster. This will at first of all help you in thinking about a lot of points, right? अब प्री डिजास्टर में इनफैक्ट अगर आप अपने मेंस के पेपर देखोगे तो वो बोला जाता है प्री डिजास्टर इज मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट. व्हाई? बिकॉज इट टॉक्स अबाउट अल्टीमेटली प्रिपरेशन सबसे ज्यादा जरूरी चीज है. यहां पे हम बात कर सकते हैं प्रिपरेशन या मिटिगेशन की. ओके, सो प्री डिजास्टर में व्हाट आर द इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग्स दैट यू शुड डेफिनेटली थिंक या नोट अबाउट. तो सबसे पहली जो हमने पहले पॉइंट भी देखा, असेसिंग द रिस्क. सो यू असेस द रिस्क एंड यू मैप इट आउट. सो रिस्क असेसमेंट एंड मैपिंग. ओके, इनफैक्ट इफ यू वुड हैव सीन द वेरी फर्स्ट पॉइंट, हजार्ड जोनेशन मैपिंग या हजार्ड मैपिंग, व्हाट इज दैट? दैट यू वांट, आप रिस्क को असेस कर रहे हो. एक जगह हो सकता है लेवल 4 रिस्क को, लेवल 3 रिस्क को, लेवल 2, लेवल 1 रिस्क. ओके, तो रिस्क असेसमेंट हो गई हमारी, हमने मैप कर दिया पूरा एरिया. Okay, so that is one thing that we have done. Then you, because this is pre, you can talk about, let's say, urban planning. यहां पे कर सकते हैं. We can even integrate infrastructure development and management. We can talk about EWS is very important. Early warning systems. Early warning systems, how can they be made better when you integrate remote sensing into it? ठीक है, तो ये बहुत जरूरी हो जाएगा. उसके बाद से एक और चीज इंपॉर्टेंट है, emergency response planning, क्योंकि if you do the emergency response planning during disaster, this is going to help you. So emergency, I'm writing ERP, this is known as emergency response planning, and very important also here is this, all of this is pre-disaster. Public education and awareness. Okay, so it is not just that the government will do some things, you have to make the people aware. Because of sometimes lack of, let's say, actionable steps, people get a lot of anxious, they get बहुत ज़्यादा nervous, it creates a whole chaos. Okay, that is why a lot of stampedes happen. People are not exactly aware where to run, where to go. Okay, so public awareness is important. Again, I'll repeat. Pre-disaster क्या क्या कर सकते हैं? Risk assessment and mapping, urban planning, infrastructure development. We can talk about early warning system. This is a very important point. In fact, जो मैंने आपको एग्जाम्पल दिया था उड़ीसा का, उड़ीसा हैज इन्वेस्टेड अ लॉट इन इट्स अर्ली वार्निंग सिस्टम्स. तो आप ये भी लिख सकते हैं कि बाकी जो कोस्टल, द डिफरेंट कोस्टल स्टेट्स कैन फॉलो द रोल मॉडल ऑफ ओडिशा इन दिस मैनर. ठीक है, बिकॉज आफ्टर द साइक्लोन्स लेट्स से व्हिच हैपेंड इनिशियली लेट्स से अर्ली 2000s इन ओडिशा, जब उन्होंने इतना अपग्रेड कर लिया अपना अर्ली वार्निंग सिस्टम्स through the use of remote sensing and GIS, they were able to reduce the devastating impact of these cyclones. और cyclones की frequency और intensity increase हो रही है. Why? Because of the threat of global warming, climate change, the warming of both Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea is the main reason for the increase of both frequency and intensity of these cyclones. Fine. तो pre-disaster कुछ ये हम point कर सकते हैं. ड्यूरिंग डिजास्टर सिर्फ एक चीज हमें ध्यान रखनी होती है, वी हैव टू टॉक अबाउट रिस्पॉन्स. वॉट एवर यू हैव टू डू, अब डिजास्टर तो आ गई, यू हैव टू रिस्पॉन्ड. ओके, अब रिस्पॉन्स में एवरीथिंग इज अबाउट टाइम, हाउ क्विकली योर रिस्पॉन्स फोर्सेज आर एबल टू एक्ट एंड हाउ वुड दे बी एबल टू. तो दैट इज वाई रियल टाइम मॉनिटरिंग हैज टू हैपन. ओके, this should be really effective real time monitoring, and number 2 has to be timely response. Even a delay of 15 minutes 20-30 minutes can lead to a lot of casualties. और इसी के लिए आपका ये इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर बहुत मजबूत होना चाहिए, बहुत सॉलिड होना चाहिए, that the moment you are able to know ठीक है this disaster has arrived, real time monitoring should begin as soon as possible and timely response has to be there. अब timely response के बाद आपको अपने rescue and relief operations you have to plan. Okay, which means a lot of relief shelter camps have to be set up. ठीक है, there has to be budgetary and resource allocation, there you need funds for that. Okay, तो basically rescue relief operations है, but उससे ज़्यादा timely response होना चाहिए, and there has to be a constant real time monitoring, and this will help you कि आपकी crowd management, where are the people, कौन सा infrastructure दबा है, कौन सी roads अब movable नहीं है, where should the people be moved to. Because if there's a disaster, I would want to move the people away. I want to reduce my casualties as much as possible and help these people. Okay. अब जब मैं बात करता हूं post disaster की, again one thing, the moment a disaster happens, people also then die of secondary infections. Why? Because what would happen after this? A lot of, let's say, diseases outbreak happen. There can also be gender-based violence. These are some of the things which happen. So when I'm talking of post-disaster, I need to make sure the people, at least in the shelter camps or the relief camps, are being taken care of. Food, nutrition, security, controlling the outbreak of diseases. And again in this, you again want proper long-term monitoring. That is again why you want proper remote sensing and GIS to be integrated. Fine. तो हमने देखा यहाँ पे pre-disaster is preparedness mitigation. Okay. यहां पे ड्यूरिंग में रिस्पॉन्स है. अब पोस्ट डिजास्टर में आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट व्हाट, रिकवरी एंड रिहैबिलिटेशन. रिकवरी एंड रिहैबिलिटेशन, इसीलिए सेंडाई फ्रेमवर्क टॉक्स अबाउट पोस्ट डिजास्टर, थिंक ऑफ बिल्ड बैक बेटर. वॉट एवर यू हैड, फॉरगेट इट, लीव इट, लूज इट. ओके, वी विल बिल्ड इट बैक बेटर. इवन इट वॉज गुड, आई कैन मेक इट इवन बेटर. Which means I will focus on disaster resilient infrastructure. And the moment you say BBB, always mention Sendai framework. That will add authenticity to your answer, right? तो हम जब disaster resilient infrastructure की बात करेंगे, we'll talk about how you can engage community, अब community, if you want to engage, you should be able to link and integrate technology. Again, that is why the role of GIS and remote sensing here also becomes important. Okay, so you have to talk about this. Okay, and again, a very important part of post disaster is damage assessment, and fourth would be medium and long term recovery plans, because short term you have done here. Okay, so if I want to again just use another color pen so that you don't, short term plan will be here. I'm focusing on immediate rescue relief, but medium and long term plans have to be built here. That is why damage assessment has to be taken in very extensive manner. How would you assess the damage if there's a flood, drought? Again, use this technology, because earlier when the technology was not there, imagine how difficult it would have been. Even the aerial reconnaissance operation, etc., would have been very difficult. So again, you have to understand this in the whole context of things. Okay, that this is something that one has to, let's say, put in proper light. Okay. Okay, moving forward, the role of again remote sensing. So now if you have understood this framework, now I'm just giving you some live examples here. For example, there will be cyclones. Okay, there are earthquakes, there are floods, droughts, or volcanoes, and for everyone, okay, you can even think of some of the live examples, etc., or the things which have happened in this particular case. Okay, so here also, what is the role of remote sensing in different disasters? I will just share a simple framework with you. Okay, one framework, of course, you can use is the previous one: pre-disaster, during disaster, and post-disaster. But 5 points also extra I want to share with you. Okay, which again borrows from there as well. One, and this can be used in all of this. How are you doing mitigation? How are you doing preparedness? In fact, the first 2 points correspond to what? Pre-disaster. ठीक है, फिर हम बात कर सकते हैं रेस्क्यू की. Fourth, we can talk about recovery. Okay, what is rescue and relief is related to the third during disaster. Okay, recovery. And again, I can, in this particular case, because I'm mentioning the case of remote sensing, the fifth point I want to just highlight is the satellites, etc., used. Although you don't have to remember what is the name of the specific satellites, if you just remember a couple of them, good enough. But again, I'm just telling you that for different disasters, you can follow a framework in which we'll talk about mitigation, we'll talk about preparedness, rescue, recovery, and ultimately that satellite which was used. Okay, so again, if I say cyclone, many cyclones have come. You use the cyclones you remember in your current affairs. Okay, you can even mention the Arabian Sea cyclones or the Bay of Bengal cyclones, right? So when you mention that, right, अब उस साइक्लोन पे हम मिटिगेशन कैसे कर सकते हैं, वही सारे सेम पॉइंट्स आप लिख सकते हो, which I've already told you. Okay, talk about use of early warning systems, talk about creation of better plans, etc., how to go for rescue, recovery. So just understand that yes, these things you have to take care of. And in fact, जब भी मैं साइक्लोन की बात करूं अब से, try to give the example of Odisha. I've given you this example multiple times. Talking of earthquake, I told you in 2001 Gujarat earthquake or 2010 Haiti earthquake. Use of sensors, use of satellites, etc., did help, although yes, there was a lot of casualty. ठीक है, a lot of infrastructure was lost, but still we understand, number one, कि हमें अपने sensors को और better करना पड़ेगा. We should be able to map better data, and still we were able to get at least some inputs and data, which is why after the 2001 earthquake, at least in India, in the earthquake part, ठीक है, we have made a lot of developments and improvements because of remote sensing. तो magnitude and the extent of damage we are able to assess better. ये याद रखेंगे. ठीक, अब सेम है केस फ्लड्स का. फ्लड्स में भी यू कैन थिंक अबाउट अर्बन फ्लड्स हैपनिंग बिकॉज ऑफ, लेट्स से, a lot of river meandering which also happens, river shifting the course. For example, हम कोसी रिवर की बात करें, okay, which again becomes a sorrow, right? There are also the issues of Brahmaputra. ठीक है, similarly Kerala में of late we have seen floods, and there was extensive use of remote sensing. In fact, that helped us to reduce the magnitude of damage. Okay, same is the case of drought. In drought also you can think about, and देखो drought में एक और चीज ये है कि again because of climate change this is getting worse. तो यू नीड एक्सेस टू लॉन्ग टर्म डेटा टू बी एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड एंड पिन पॉइंट कि हाँ रिमोट सेंसिंग को यूज करके वी विल बी एबल, सो यू कैन अगेन अगर आप मैप बनाना चाहो, or you can do, at least in this question you can also draw a simple map. You can show the regions prone to cyclones, regions prone to earthquake, similarly drought, show the Rayalaseema, Marathwada, or the different regions, okay, Vidarbha, etc., which are prone to droughts, right? अब इसी को अगर if we are able to analyze, है ना, through remote sensing we might be able to reduce the damage. So mitigation preparedness के levels पे भी हम इसको better plan कर सकते हैं, ठीक है. अब ड्रॉट्स के केस में आप वाटर सप्लाई, वेजिटेशन कवर, यू आर एबल टू मैप दिस, ठीक है. सेम अगेन इज द केस ऑफ वॉल्केनो ऑल्सो. You can again think about it and again mention some points that how if there is a volcano burst, again you can think about dormant and active volcanoes etc. तो उसमें भी if we are able to see तो extent of which magma या lava overflow हुआ है, किन किन regions में कितनी emission है gases का, कितना area impacted है, all these things you can understand and plan your response, evacuation, relief, recovery better. इसीलिए and again see in disaster management you are also expected to have some idea on the terms or the vocabulary. इसीलिए ये जो एक स्लाइड है, दिस इज वन ऑफ द लेट्स से गुड फ्रेमवर्क्स फॉर यू टू डील विद एनी काइंड ऑफ डिजास्टर्स दैट आर देयर. ओके, ऑल यू देन नीड टू नो is to mention exact specific examples from current affairs, which again you can follow through our current affairs monthly magazines, right? या जो भी अपडेशन डॉक्यूमेंट आप जो भी फॉलो करते हो, इन सब में जो भी एग्जांपल्स अभी मैंने दिए, एंड यू कैन ऑल्सो, यू आर फ्री टू ऐड योर एग्जांपल्स ऑल्सो, फाइन, बिकॉज बाय द टाइम यू गिव योर मेंस मे बी सम न्यू डेवलपमेंट्स हैव हैपेंड, बट ये फ्रेमवर्क तो सेम ही रहेगा हमारा. ओके, सो दिस इज वेयर यू कैन बी वेरी स्मार्ट, यूटिलाइज योर टाइम, राइट. अब देखो, आई हैव टॉकन अबाउट अ लॉट ऑफ पॉजिटिव्स, नीड, applications of GIS, but you also need to understand there are certain challenges. तो limitations जानना भी उतना ही जरूरी है. अब देखिए, when I'm talking here, so there are technical issues. अब देखो, ये सारे मैंने क्लब करे हैं as a technical issues, which include issues, technical issues हैं, GIS के खुद के issues हैं, complex data structure, large amounts of data, and large storage. अब how will I tell you, let's say, अब इसको भी समझना आसान है आपके लिए कि देखिए, अब आपने मतलब लेट्स से आई डिप्लॉय सेंसर, ठीक. अब सेंसर कोई भी है, सेंसर की रेंज होगी, मे बी इफ आई वांट टू सी अ पर्टिकुलर फॉरेस्ट फायर, द सेंसर विच आई एम यूजिंग, मे बी द स्पेक्ट्रल रेंज of that sensor is not enough, number one. Second, there can be some mechanical issues, they can be wear and tear, they can be depreciation of asset. तो टेक्निकल ऐसे काफी इश्यूज आ सकते हैं जो हमें प्रॉब्लम कर सकते हैं. तो एक ये हो गया इशू. दूसरा, इफ इट इज कैप्चरिंग द इमेज बट व्हेन इट इज रिलेइंग इट, तो उसका टर्न अराउंड टाइम लेस है. ओके, यू डोंट हैव टू गो इनटू लॉट ऑफ डिटेल्स, बट स्टिल दीज आर बेसिक that when you use a sensor, they can always be a problem. Just think about when somebody is capturing your images, चाहे आप if there is a photo shoot, anything which happens, बहुत बार images खराब हो जाती हैं, बहुत बार the sensors or the lens have to be replaced continuously. How is it integrated with technology? Sometimes there can be some issues, right? Same issues है GIS में. अब आपने फोटो कैप्चर कर दी, बट फोटो का इंटरप्रिटेशन, फोटो की विजुअल एनालिसिस can also face some issues in GIS. Okay, so अब यहां पे क्या है, let's say you have duplicate records, there are some missing elements, ठीक. so if you had an image, और उस image के लिए you have to have 4 elements to analyze it. What if you only have 3? अब ये element नहीं है आपका, so you will not be able to analyze it. Then you can have very complex data structures. अब देखिए, जो विजुअल या जो एक टर्म मैंने यूज किया था पहले, हजार्ड मॉडल्स, द मॉडल्स हैव टू बी ट्रेन्ड अगेन एंड अगेन. ओके, अब मॉडल को ट्रेन करते हो आप डेटा पे. व्हाट इफ द डेटा इज वेरी कॉम्प्लेक्स, इट इज अनस्ट्रक्चर्ड एंड यू आर नॉट एबल टू मेक आउट एग्जैक्टली व्हाट टू बी मेड आउट ऑफ इट. तो कॉम्प्लेक्स डेटा स्ट्रक्चर विल ऑल्सो बी अ प्रॉब्लम. आप जब इमेज एनालाइज ही नहीं कर पा रहे हो सही से, आप ट्रेंड्स कैसे बताओगे? हाउ विल इट एड योर पॉलिसी? वो भी एक चैलेंज हो गया. एंड देन अगेन लार्ज अमाउंट्स ऑफ डेटा. अब just imagine the kind of phones we use, everybody is clicking. Okay, so whatever is the storage available, everything is getting exhausted very quickly. And think it at a level of remote sensing, जहां पे इतने बड़े बड़े sensors या cameras या lenses use होंगे, the size of the image, and you have to continuously monitor it. Everybody wants it at the spatial level. तो large amounts of data, अब वो data का amount भी ज़्यादा, complexity भी ज़्यादा, and ऊपर से there can be some issues. So just you have to have very good technicians. Technical support has to be very robust and solid. And all of this requires money, because ultimately the more higher a technical जितना होगा, डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज के लिए उतना बड़ा चैलेंज होगा. ठीक है. सो लार्ज स्टोरेज अमाउंट्स ऑफ डेटा, एंड एडिशनली ये जो सारे इश्यूज हैं, दिस विल कॉज अ ह्यूज प्रॉब्लम. ओके. तो अब एक ये प्रॉब्लम हो गई. दूसरी, अब देखो, मैंने आपको स्टार्टिंग में बोला था ओपन स्काईज की बात करी थी, बट नो वन कैन डिनाई the use of a lot of sensor. For example, when I talk about Google, okay, तो Google का GPS है बहुत कुछ. A lot of the satellites of US are able to just track or just see, ठीक है, एक ऊपर लेवल से, the location, the homes, the movement of traffic, etc. अब imagine करिए, this can also pose a threat to national security and also cyber security. So the more you use, and again there will be different set of countries. Maybe there are countries which don't share a very good relation. And what if somebody can remotely see the movement of traffic, and not just traffic, think about the critical infrastructure. तो ऐसे safeguards भी जरूरी हैं. Even if I talk about the best of policies कि हाँ open skies agreement होगा, there will be a lot of coordination, but what about sovereignty, what about suspicion? ठीक है. तो ये दोनों issues हो सकते हैं कि one, मान लीजिए आप बहुत अच्छे से अपना सारी चीजें इंटीग्रेट करके कर रहे हैं. What if there's a cyber attack and somehow your data, our remote sensing gets compromised? There have been some Hollywood movies also made on this particular plot, but what if this becomes a reality, है ना? तो ये challenge है, which means आपका जो security infrastructure has to be very robust, and also your national security cannot be compromised at any cost, which means better collaboration and better, very good, robust security systems have to be there, right? उसमें भी again think that developing countries again have a challenge. They would have to invest that level of money, and second, वो डिपेंडेंट हो जाएंगे ट्रांसफर ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी पे. एंड द मोमेंट व्हेन आई टॉक ऑफ ट्रांसफर ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी, कंट्रीज लाइक यूएस डोंट वांट टू शेयर द प्रोप्राइटरी पेटेंट्स या प्रोप्राइटरी टेक्नोलॉजी. अब वहां पे फिर फंस जाएंगे हम, है ना? मतलब कोई भी, नॉट जस्ट अस. सो देयर इज दिस पर्टिकुलर थिंग. सो अंटिल अनलेस वी आर एबल टू मैन्युफैक्चर और हैव आवर ओन टेक्नोलॉजी, by the way, that would need more time, and not just more time, more budgetary allocation, more investment in research and development. तो वो एक long term issue हो जाएगा. Okay. Also there can be, one is depend how much internet is available. abhi jaise for example when we talk about satellite based internet, which still is in the initial phases, how will that pan out? So one of the issues in disaster is, I said, real time monitoring. Now this will also depend on how, let's say, how much is the internet available, infrastructure है कैसा, कितने समय का आप डेटा स्टोर कर पा रहे हो. Okay, what are the servers where the data is getting stored. Okay. Cost of technology, we also know that technology is getting more and more expensive, right? How much and for how long would the countries be able to afford it? ये भी एक problem है. ठीक है. And ultimately the issue of intellectual property rights. अब देखो, जब भी हम टेक्नोलॉजी की बात करेंगे, there will be some big technology giants sharing the technologies. अब patents will be, अब हो सकता है कुछ conflict हो patents में, you are using the data set of some other, let's say sensor किसी और का है, उसकी royalty rights आप pay कर रहे हो, या if there's a dispute which arises, this can also lead to a problem. Okay, so these things have to be thought about. That is why the new set of challenges can come in both space, okay, or through the, let's say, integration of technology, right? अब इसमें भी one more thing I can say, both as a benefit etc. अब you can think कि सर हमारे पास जो भी डेटा है, हम AI या मशीन लर्निंग से इंटीग्रेट करके और अच्छी मॉडल्स बना सकते हैं. ट्रू. But again, to have that capability to process this real-time data at this fast pace requires a lot of understanding, investment, okay? Maybe a lot of supercomputing, etc. Good models have to be created. And this might also get compromised because abhi AI can also be thought as a double-edged sword. So ये सारे जो issues हैं, one has to understand and then put them in the right context, okay? Then which brings me to the way forward, right? कि इंटीग्रेशन जरूरी है. अब इंटीग्रेशन का मतलब क्या है? कि हाँ, रिमोट सेंसिंग और आपका जीआईएस अच्छे से इंटीग्रेट हो. ओके, इन योर पॉलिसीज ऑल्सो, थ्रू योर एप्स ऑल्सो. सो फॉर एग्जाम्पल, इफ देयर इज अ फार्मर हु वांट्स टू अंडरस्टैंड, ठीक है, कि क्या भाई अभी ड्रॉट या रेन या मानसून का क्या लेवल है, वो उनको इंटीग्रेटेड डेटा दिखे. अदरवाइज व्हाट हैपेंस, ये एक डेटा यहां पे, एक चीज यहां पे, you have to then put them in one place, and then you have to understand. So integration is also very a complicated technical process, but it should be done. ठीक? Cyber security we just saw has to be properly understood, magnitude of the problem, having proper essential safeguards बहुत जरूरी है यहाँ पे safeguards आपके लिए. ठीक है? तो cyber security has to be robust. Then there needs to be a decentralization. ऐसा नहीं हो कि वी आर जस्ट लेट्स से जो भी डेटा है वी आर स्टोरिंग इट इन सम अदर कंट्री इन सम अदर सर्वर्स. इट शुड बी डिसेंट्रलाइज्ड, व्हिच मींस बोथ एट द नेशनल लेवल एंड एट द लेवल ऑफ द पीपल. ठीक है? तो वो जितना डिसेंट्रलाइज्ड होगा, ओके. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, इफ द लोकल बॉडीज कम्युनिटी मेंबर्स हैव द एक्सेस एंड दे आर द वंस, उस लेवल पे डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन, देयर विल बी मोर ट्रस्ट, द पीपल वुड ऑल्सो बी विलिंग, प्लस इट विल बी मोर रोबस्ट. ठीक है? तो अगर ये सारी चीजें इंटीग्रेट कर ली, साइबर सिक्योरिटी भी अच्छी कर दी, हमने डिसेंट्रलाइज कर लिया, द बेटर इट इज. एंड लास्टली, दिस रिक्वायर्स अ लॉट ऑफ इन्वेस्टमेंट इन फिजिकल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, but also in social infrastructure. Social, by social I mean health, education. We want to create a skilled workforce because we need skilled professionals to be able to operate it. तो इन्वेस्टमेंट दोनों जगह जरूरी है. हाँ, आपको टेक्नोलॉजी में भी इन्वेस्ट करना है, आपको फिजिकल असेट्स बनाने पड़ेंगे, एंड ऑल्सो इन द सोशल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, एंड देन वी विल बी एबल टू टैकल दीज डिजास्टर्स, राइट? बिकॉज अगेन, to understand this, so in the conclusion only, what will I tell you, that these disasters are multi. ठीक है? तो ऐसा नहीं होता कि एक सिंगल डिजास्टर आएगी. एंड इन फैक्ट हियर ऑल्सो आई जस्ट कोट द सेकेंड ARC ऑल्सो, ओके, दैट you have to think about a multi-hazard conceptualization. हम लोग क्या करते हैं, हम लोग सोचते हैं सिर्फ volcanoes एक is one, let's say earthquake is one, so we think of one disaster at a time. But the second ARC, okay, and again different committees on disaster management have talked about a multi-hazard conceptualization. अब ये multi-hazard conceptualization होगा कैसे? How would this happen? This will happen when you integrate proper technologies, remote sensing हो गई, GIS हो गई, and then you create proper long-term policies. Okay, so this is how we will be able to have better rescue, rehabilitation, recovery, and ultimately then we will be building back better. ठीक है? Which goes in tune or is in line or in sync with the Sendai framework. Okay. तो इसीलिए रिमोट सेंसिंग और GIS को we have to understand it in a proper manner, and I think through this discussion you will be able to write a very good mains answer. This has ramifications both in your GS3 as well, and generally technology के साथ भी आप इसको समझ सकते हो. Okay, and again this can be used in governance also. Okay, so with this we come to the end of this discussion. Again, if you want to just get access to the notes, you can join the Telegram channel Sunya Notes 50. Okay, and again please have or keep a look on the other mains article discussions. They will definitely help you in writing very good answers. So thank you so much.